Let's go over some equipment we have for comfort basics. So a lot of times we have clients that have wrist issues, and putting too much flexion can be an issue. Feel free to find a pair of handles that we've got, right? You can use those to keep the wrist nice and straight. That can work really well. Sometimes the parallettes that we also have can work great. You can also think in terms of a nice handle to place on top of a band that keeps the wrist straight as opposed to letting that wrist go into some form of a bend. That is a great way to do that. You also have your bar pads. Now, typically we don't recommend these for any type of a bar squat, but maybe in the case of like a good morning where we were loading up and shifting forward, that can work out well. This also is great for the bar when we're doing any sort of hip thrust. That can work wonderful as well. Or say you've got somebody that is working on doing a push-up, but they have some kind of sensitivity in their hands and they've got a bar that is attached here. They're doing a higher bar, and you put two of these pads on, nice firm grip, nice and smooth. Just make sure it doesn't roll. Think of ways that you can find comfort. The other main thing we've got, of course, are those pads, right? And so this works really well for knees in this circumstance, half kneeling, elbows for a side plank, of course, but even things like being on a bench, even if it is one of our older clients that has maybe a lot of this lordosis that is happening within their body and they're getting that forward head posture, if they are on a bench, even if it is an incline, you might need to have this directly underneath that head to help support them because their head needs to be higher and it's not touching the ground. Look for those opportunities with your clients there. You can use either of these pads, of course, if you're trying to help a client with some rotator cuff issues and you're keeping that elbow off of the body, chest is trying to stay up. If you're trying to get the adductors to engage, this is where even with a glute bridge, you put one or two of these and have them squeeze as they're down doing their glute bridges. You can utilize these tools for comfort and for action as you need. The PVC pipes are another good one. Client may be struggling with balance. Give them another point of contact with the ground, some form of external stabilization while they're going through the process of building that up. All right, let's talk about now how to find the perfect height on some of these things. So for a lot of clients, a box may not be the perfect height for them to do a step up. We don't want to necessarily put 4 million risers. So let's just shorten the distance between the box and the floor by adding 1 or 2 risers. Now I've taken a standard 12-inch box here and I've actually shortened it by 1.5 inches. And so I've made my contact with the ground a little bit better. These risers also work really well if I've got a client that is on the shorter side and they need to have them on either side of their bench press, or they have low back issues, to take their feet and wedge them on here, elevates their feet, takes away some of that pressure because they're not gonna live in as much of an arch with that movement pattern. So there's lots of different ways, lots of different tools. You can always use the risers to help clients if they're doing some form of a squat, any of the wedges that I'm talking about, to be able to move their body into a different place there as well. Lots of options. Always look for what can be simplest, but those are the main ones that you're definitely. We use 3 main different balls at Block Fitness. The first one is going to be your slam ball. It's your smaller one. It's very dense. It is sand or gel filled, also known as a jam ball. But a slam ball is designed to slam. It is going to go dead when it hits the ground. It will not bounce unless you throw with some extreme force. It is not meant to be thrown at a wall. It is meant to be slammed on the ground or used as external weight. Then we have what we call a medicine ball, traditional medicine ball, otherwise known as a wall ball, because you can do a wall ball exercise with it. This one, however, and this is why we're going over this, we know that a med ball will bounce. That could be someone's face if they are not prepared for this, and this is why this is so critical to know that med balls are the big bouncy ones. Slam balls are meant to be slammed into the ground and go from there. And then the last one is your stability ball, which is where you're going to be performing things where you're actually focused on stability, also known within the physical therapy world as a Swiss ball. So if you hear any of those opposite terms, just thought they would be helpful for you as you're going through them with clients. But in your app at Block Fitness, you're gonna see slam ball, medicine ball, and stability ball. We have 3 main different types of bands here that we use. So the first one is a mini band. By the name, as it's described, it is a miniature band. Now you have the rubber ones. Oftentimes they're used within the videos, but we also have cloth. That is really client specific. For a client that has thicker quads, right, some larger legs, the band that is typically of choice is going to be cloth. Then it won't roll on up, works really well. Also, if you have some leggings that these bands tend to want to slide on, can be beneficial. So whichever one feels better for that client. Then we've got two longer position bands. We have our classic band. This is just going to be called band or resistance band. It's what we use for most of our exercises. And the tube band. Tube band is where it's got the little links on either side, the carabiners, and it is shaped like a tube. It is a piece of round tubing. Now, of course, you can use all of them as deemed necessary, regardless of what is prescribed for that client within their app, but this is how they're going to be labeled as you're walking clients through on what to get. And also note that the color that is always used within the app on demonstration videos is simply to try, just like I'm holding now, to make it very visible and easy for them to be able to see what is in the video, not what is going to be used by them in that workout. They might need to go much heavier or much lighter based on the exercise, their strength level, and what. For most of your band attachments, it's going to be a really simple process. Whether it's high, whether it's low, you can attach to pretty much anything that is rigid. You're just going to take your band, pull it around from behind, and link through and pull. That's how we're going to set up for most of those apparatus pieces. Now, on a few occasions, you're going to have where it's two. So now if I have this as a link through, I can link my band just directly through the same way without tying it. And now I've got a double handle situation so that I can do some goalposts or exercises of that nature. Now, so let's say you needed to put this on a higher piece. What I like to do is I'll hold one end of that band as close to that rig above me as possible. I'll take my other one, I'll lock this arm out, and I'll just throw it so it kind of threads right on through. Now you can see that it's dangling on through, and I'll pull it down through, and now I've got a nice high attachment point for that band. To get that off, obviously you want to be safe, and that's where usually a bench can come in handy. You can step up on that, or a box if it's too high to be able to reach, or have someone tall, even if it is a member, grab that band for you. You can also stand on something to get it up and over there. Just make sure you're in a safe spot before you ever do so. Now, the other band attachment that we might have is going to be our tube bands. With the tube bands, instead of linking it around that way, they've already got a clip typically on them, a small carabiner. And what I like to do here, I'm going to remove this guy here, but I typically use the J-hook, right? Not for anything other than for the fact that I don't want this to slide down and get out of the way. So I simply link this through, you got your J-hook, and it's as simple as clip, and it's good to go. Now what's nice is when you're doing a tube band, it's not gonna fall to the ground because it's not tight against the pole. If I didn't have this J-hook on there, it would slide down. Is it a problem? No, but it definitely just adds one more element to have to pick those up. So it's a nice feature just to think in terms of clientele wanting to have simple, functional form, and all of these little things matter. Last thing that you can do, anytime you're using any of the actual band attachments, if a client would prefer to use a handle on them other than having the band rub against their hand, grab some of those handles. Whatever is used typically for the cable machine, a single cable, a rope, a handle, a straight bar, whatever those things might be, go grab those for them and have them and encourage them to use them as well, as long as we return them to their original home so that we know exactly what. With setting up J-hooks, you want to just try and have the outside position on the outside of the rig. You're always going to set up in a 4-foot gap. So you're going to slide in and then just drop that in. It's going to anchor in. Try not to have them the other way around. It's just going to create a little bit more stability from this aspect here. Now, as far as height goes, obviously with a front squat and a back squat, they can be pretty easy to help figure out. Now for a bench press, for instance, you've got these lower dots that are all the holes. They're really close together on purpose, and that's because you want a little bit more variability with those. Now for most people, right, going 3 down from the top part of that bench hole line, so where they start to get really close together, just count down 3, slide that in. For most people that we have that are going to be between 5'4", 5'7", right in that range, that's where most of their arms tend to fall. You may have to go down 4, you may have to go down 2. Someone with really long arms or someone who's really tall, maybe a little bit higher. But if you go 3 down, you're almost always going to be accurate from the start. Same concept goes when you're using any of the other apparatus that are going to go into the rig, right? So whether you're using some nice like supporting arms, it's going to slide in, drop in, and then you've got that extra hole here to link on through so that it's really rigid and locked in because it is such a long base that you're using. Same thing when you're using your attachment here that is going to be for your Bulgarian split squats or anything in that nature where you need the pad. You're going to slide on in, lock in, and drop that link in. Make sure it's locked in just so it doesn't have any deviation or play. Now, when it comes to setting up for an incline bench or anything of that nature, that's where I always have someone test out that first position before they go. What I like to do, right, is I typically will have the back piece of that anchor of the bench, so that long strip where it's attached to the wheels, that's gonna almost line up with the base of the rig. So you've got the anchors of the rig, that goes in line. Then when we bring it up, depending on the height, but now you can see if I was to lay down, I would actually be perfectly in line with this, but my J-hooks would be really low. So for most people, those J-hooks, if we have that base where it's all for your lower flat bench, and then we go up to our traditionals for anything higher than that, for most people, it's gonna be now 3 up. So you go 3 down for your flat bench, 3 up for your incline bench. And then that is gonna be a nice perfect angle. And you could see if I was down here, I would link up the base of this as well so that they can wedge in, creates a better base. So you wanna lift the butt. But then for most people, this position, if I had 2 on there to lift off and pull down, would work really well. And again, from the back, it's lined up already perfectly without me having to do anything on that rig.
You'll be using a different series of barbells here at Block Fitness. Now you have, of course, your traditional barbells. Now we'll have 3 different weights. You will have a technique bar, which weighs 15 pounds. Great for someone that is not strong enough yet, or someone that needs to learn a certain movement skill pattern without adding weight. Then we have a 35-pound bar, which is a little bit smaller in diameter. So sometimes this is preferred just based on grip for someone that's even just doing like a bent over row, and they may not have the grip strength to grip the thicker 28 or 28.5 millimeter grip bar that is like your traditional 45s. Then we will have our traditional 45s. They are typically going to be the black bars that we have. Beyond that, we also have safety squat bars. You'll sometimes see this marked as SSB. We have a few different options that are here. We do have our 45-pound bar at our other location. They're the black ones. And at this location, we also have a 60-pound bar. And so it is marked on the bases there, but it is nice and wide. You do need to be aware that these go into position so that the handles are facing into the rig, and they're gonna go this direction so that I can step up into them and they're resting already here. If they're pointing towards the client, that bar is backwards. Now they are labeled with which little arrows with which direction to go, and that can be helpful. You also have your trap bars. We've got a couple different ones. You've got your traditional hex bar or trap bar. We call it a trap bar, where you're gonna be able to stand on in. They are 45 pounds. There's one at the other location, at our Barbell location, that is a 70-pound bar, so do take that into account. It's thicker, and people will be all aware of that. And then we have our open trap bar, and the reason this can be nice is that you can do step-ups with it, you can do lunges with it because half the bar is not going to get in the way. You can also load this bar because it will stand on its own feet and the plates will slide on up. So sometimes clients prefer that. The one thing to note is that it does have rotating handles here, whether you go with a low handle or a high handle. Now, just like that, our regular trap bars are going to either have a high handle or they're going to have a low handle. So the direction that you put that bar is going to determine how high that client is lifting that bar. Now, if the high handle is still not enough and that client needs those to be even higher to prevent maybe some low back issues, or maybe you're just working on some high position power, then we're going to use those risers that we have and are readily available for clients at any point in time. The last main barbell that we have is going to be your Swiss bar. Now, a Swiss bar is your multi-grip bench press bar, so that they can go with a nice wide position, whether it's a bench or using this even as an inverted row, where you'll put it on the J-hooks, you'll lean back and imagine this is on the rig, and I can do an inverted row from this position. I can go into more of a middle position, or I can even go with these angled, which can be really shoulder friendly. And that's why that Swiss bar becomes a great tool. It's going to focus a little bit more on the front delts, the triceps, but it also can be much more of a friendly shoulder position because of its neutrality that is putting the shoulder position through. Your other bars are going to be your easy bar, which is going to be your bar that's got that fluid bend in it. Let me grab one for you. So with your easy bar, it's going to be this guy here. It's already got the clips on. This is going to be typically for any of your curl variations or any of your tricep variations as well. And then sometimes you'll have some other specialty bars that's typically going to cover it. The last thing that you might encounter as well is a T-bar. So with a T-bar, let me grab that for us here. Also known as a T-bell. Now this has a nice handle, a pin. We're going to slide this pin off. We're going to make sure that this is on the ground before we go any further. And then you're going to place plates directly onto that T-bar. Then you're going to slide this back on down, get the appropriate height that works for that client, and then they're going to be able to lift this just like they would any other position, like a kettlebell would be for either a squat or a hinge. Now because it is high, oftentimes we have to raise the client up and keep that handle nice and low. In that case, we're going to have a couple of risers on either side, or we're going to have some boxes on either side to be able to accommodate for where that client is.
Setting up for a hip thrust, whether we're using a barbell, whether we're using a dumbbell, can be done off of a bench. Feel free to take a client off the side of a bench. The challenge with a bench sometimes is that it can be pretty firm on that back. It can also be that it's a little too high for a client to be able to get their body up. Now there are ways around that. You could of course raise the body on up. So that's where we want to use pads underneath our butt to simply raise us up. So imagine this is a bench behind me as opposed to what we're using, which is a hip thrust pad. Now I have elevated my body. Say in turn, it's the opposite. I can't get this bar over me and I need to raise the weights on up. That's why we typically use the bumper plates. These 18-inch plates give us a little bit of that range, but use risers. Those black risers that we have, place them underneath each one or even place them on plates, and that gives you that range to be able to have that assistance from there, right? With our setup though, I wanted to cover a few things. I'm using a hip thrust pad here. It's a bench. It can be used as a traditional bench. So a lot of times we have clients that will row on these, clients that will still bench press on these. It's a very versatile tool. If you do not have access to enough benches within your setting, grab this, throw a client on there. Life is good. You can also then wedge this against something, either like a rig, or you can wedge a kettlebell behind it, put it against a wall if you feel like it is going to slide. If it is on the rubber, it typically won't slide, which is kind of nice. Now for setting up a hip thrust, we want to think I'm wedging my body all the way back against, and I've got a few different options. Some clients are going to like your traditional hip thrust pad. That's going to slide on. I'm going to roll this on up, and I'm just going to make sure that the part that has the opening is facing up. Clients will often let that roll down, not even realizing it, and that bar with a lot of weight will crush right down on top of their pelvis. Not a fun thing. The other option is to go with either one of the square pads or even the hip thrust pads, depending on where you're at and what we have, and you can wedge that on here, and then it's just a kind of a nice roll of a sandwich and pops on up. To get up on this, typically, whether I had that pad or here, I'm going to use my elbows, I'm going to wedge my body on back, and then from here, I'm going to set my feet with whichever position is desired based on the hip thrust I'm going for. The pad is going to be right underneath my shoulder blades, so my elbows aren't doing anything. My butt is floating here, and then I can bridge on up and through, and I'm going to keep my head forward in this rounded position to get as much hip extension as possible. Then I can just slide on down and roll this on off. Same thing works when I'm using this pad. If I'm using a dumbbell, I'm going to use a tilt and be able to bring it on top of me. Just have a client really be aware of where their fingers are in space. Now, if that doesn't work, what we can definitely do, especially with a dumbbell position, is we can start from the top. Top works really well here, works really well on a bench, and then we can slide and lower our body on down to the ground from here, as opposed to starting from the ground. Client still struggles with that, you can have two coaches lift that bar onto them as long as it's a safe setting, and then maybe we do need to switch that movement out for something else. Removing weight from a barbell. Now, if it's on a rack, what we want to be conscious of is that we are removing weight from each side back and forth. We do not want to unrack all the weight on one side, leaving all the weight on the other side, and have this bar potentially tip on over. So do be cognizant of that and aware of that. It's also why we use the clips whenever we're benching. Make sure you hear a clip and watch for that. Teach clients how to do that. Now, for removing weight from a barbell, imagine I had lots of plates on either side. What we want to go with first is, I'm going to roll this around, but I'm going to unclip. Notice how I've straddled the bar here, and this is going to typically be the best position for most people. If you do not have the actual little hook, which I don't have here at this location right now, but it is a wedge that allows us to come here and it lifts it on up, you push it down. We do have it at most of our locations, and so it's an easy way for us to be able to use a jack stand style, that's what it's called, it's a jack stand, to get those weights off. But if you don't have that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna straddle the weight, we're gonna sit down into our hips where we're in a safe position with the flat back, and we're gonna slide the weights all the way off on one side. You're gonna wanna get all the weights off, whether it's using two hands or whatever the case may be, and you're gonna leave the other side completely loaded on up, right? Then from there, what we're going to do is we're gonna take this clip on off, and with no matter how much weight is on there, we're gonna lift this on up safely, and then we're gonna just be able to lift that bar on out and walk it on in. So all those weights just got dumped. Now, one more trick that we can always use if we're trying to create a jack stand style is if you have, this is why I took them off first, but say we have a lot of big plates on there, not like these 10s or anything, and you imagine I've got plates on the other side, but you can use a small plate. Small plate, you roll just the big plate that is closest, it doesn't quite work with small plates, roll that one onto that bar, and imagine this is straight, and then all these other ones, what's nice is because it's just wedged and it's created this lift on that first big plate, the rest of them are gonna have that leverage and that space between the ground, and we can easily slide those off until we get to the last one. This is gonna take a lot of pressure off of us from having to do that for multiple plates. Then we can do that bar lift for just that last plate, tip it on up and dump the other plates on off. Just of course, make sure your J-hooks, not your J-hooks, your clips are already off, removed. Setting up our landmine. Now, whether there's a base that is anchored into the floor or we have something that is attached to a rig, it's all gonna operate the same. So we're gonna simply slide that bar into that aspect of the attachment, right? Do make sure, sometimes people will wanna help and they'll wanna lift. Be very careful. That is a small gap. You don't want anybody's fingers to get pinched within that area. It can be really dangerous. Now, you can have this where it's directly on the floor, but in many cases, we need something that has some form of a stand. With the landmine stand, make sure that it is in a safe position, it's not twisted. You can also adjust the height of the stand based on what is needed. Just make sure you hear that click. And what I thoroughly recommend is that you slide it all the way out. The last thing that we want to do, even if it's at a full height, is have that stand be halfway through in a precarious position. The other thing to note here regarding the stand is you want to create it from a strong, stable base. So notice I've got it wedging into the bar. They create almost a V or an X position. You wouldn't want it going the other direction. If it's going the other direction, I've got a lot of weight on here, it's going to shift, it could tilt. That where it could be very dangerous for any reason. Now, with a landmine, you could be using just the bar, but you also have a series of attachments that you might need. So for any of your pressing variations or such, you also have these nice long handles, slides right on. Totally up to you if you want to lock this down or not. It really depends on the move. Most of the time it's slow and it's controlled and it's leveraged, so it's not going to be a big deal. But we've got a smaller grip here, which makes it kind of nice, or the ball, so that if you are doing any kind of press variation, now you've got this position, which can be comfortable, or for somebody that has smaller hands, this position, which can be more comfortable as well. It also works really well. You wouldn't need the stand if it was a row exercise, but to be able to row on through, you've got a much smaller grip that makes it more conducive for a lot of clients. Now, also, you've got your Viking. So anytime you see the word Viking with a landmine, that's what this guy is. Now you would put all of your weight on first before you do this. So they do need to take the attachment off when they're making this landmine heavier. But from here, with this landmine attachment, now we've got two close handles for a close neutral position, two wide handles for a wide neutral position, or you've got your overhead, right, for your overhead position. Now notice how whenever I'm doing this, I'm gonna create my body to wedge into the landmine the exact same way but the stand would have wedged in to support it. When I'm pressing, I press and I get slightly underneath the bar and then bring it right back down so that it would be sitting on my clavicle, almost like I would be doing a straight bar for a front squat position. I exhale and keep my heels down and I'm nice and tight. Works really well. I could also have this and have this on the ground with a plate on there and do a row where I'm rowing from that neutral position. Works really well, right? Our other attachments that we can also have on here typically is only going to be stuff where we're not going to have the stand. We're just going to be down, but we have a single handle and this works really well. So you've got a lot of plates. We can work it from this direction. Be aware it will slide. You can always put a clip on the end of this because it is still just a barbell. So you can use the clip to slide, keep any of these from sliding. So say I wanted to have this on the outside here and I'm doing a row and I needed to have a little bit of that height with this handle, works really well. Say that I want to come from the other direction, right? And I'm going to have my plates on this side of the handle so that they're out in front of me and I'm rowing back. Maybe it's a little bit more of a lat focus as opposed to a rear delt infraspinatus exercise, and I'm focusing on a different aspect of my back. Great way to add a little bit of fluidity to the exercises that are deemed better for me. Same thing with your wide handles or any of your V handles. You can slide those directly on, stack your plates on up. One nice feature that can work really well when I'm doing this is I'll have it just upside down. I'll stack my plates on by simply leveraging. I'll pull it on up, I'll slide a plate on, I'll link it back on down. Makes it kind of easy, especially if you're doing a bunch of small plates on there, to let it rest. And then when I'm ready, I can pick up with two hands. This is typically where you're already going to be standing over it, bent on over, and going with a row position here, right? And you've also got the ability to use the classic V handle on this as well. With this, you don't need to slide anything on whatsoever. You've got your plates on there, called a D handle or a V handle, depending on what part of the world you're coming from. But you're simply gonna link it up underneath the bar. It wedges right up against the edge, and then we can row directly on in. Now with most landmine exercises like this, I do recommend small plates. Anything that is gonna be smaller in diameter is typically gonna be a much easier movement to not let it hit the body, right? When it's hitting the body, that can get a little uncomfortable, can be a little more challenging as opposed to like the big bumper plates. Works really, really well. So there's your landmine. Obviously we have some other attachments in some circumstances, but for the most part, that's everything. Setting up and using the sissy squat machine. Now, first fun fact, a lot of clients are gonna be like, oh, I'm a sissy, that's why I need this. It's actually incorrect. This is named after Sisyphus, which is the Greek mythology of the story of the man who was punished for eternity to push a boulder up a hill and it would roll back on down, and he was constantly engaged in quadriceps activities driving on up, and so his quads became massive, and that's how this was named, or that movement was named. So kind of a fun, pointless fact here. So it's on wheels. You can roll it out. It's very light, makes it kind of nice. But from here, we're gonna have a pin. We're gonna lift that pin on out. And let's go first into the sissy squat position, all the way on up. Do make sure that it goes through both holes, of course, but also the piece so that it can't slide at all. A lot of times clients will put the pin with the one right below it, not realizing it actually goes through the base of this, right? Now, you wanna set this up height-wise for most people so that when they're on here, their base of their hamstrings would sit. They can crank this down, but try not to have clients overly tighten things if you can. And then they're gonna sit back into it. It's a floating butt. It locks in the quads. It is actually causing anterior translation of the tibia, forcing us to shift back away from the patella, which is basically a form of just kneecap distraction. And so ultimately it makes us engage the quad and spares the knee itself from taking the brunt, because we're not having that femur slide forward into that patella, right? The anterior translation of the tibia takes that away. They don't need to know that. They just need to know that they are safe here. You can use a leverage if they're really struggling to be able to get on out. You can adjust the height by simply lifting this and locking in. Try again to not have clients constantly screwing this thing down super tight in fear. Once it's locked in, you can double check. It can be on the tight side, but it does not need to be excessive. Now let's go into how to use this for back extensions. For back extensions, I'm simply gonna lower it by 1. It's at a nice little bit of an angle, and I'm gonna raise this guy on up because I want this to be, for the most part, as high as I possibly can. My heels wedge into the pads on the opposite side. I lean on down. It's gonna be somewhere between mid-thigh and as high as my actual hips. I'm either gonna round if I'm going for a more glute hamstring dominant position, or I'm gonna go straight and reach if I'm going for actual low back, depending on the exercise that is there. Do make sure that this part comes down before we put it away, and make sure that it is locked in so that when we go to lift it, this piece doesn't come up. The last thing you want is for it to be on the wall and boom, boom, falls on down. And again, then just roll it away and put it where